All right. Hello, everybody. My name is 𝗞𝗲𝘆𝗜𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗁. Welcome to the session today. I'm really excited for this topic and the panel that we have. And so with that, I just want to share just a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Our theme is accelerating change in security. And we all know how fast the security and technology is evolving. So our panelists today, we're really going to talk about that evolution across three different industries. Industry, government, and education. And so with that, I'd like to introduce people to our panel. So we're going to start out with Megan Maloney.
Morning, everybody. I am Megan Maloney. I'm an associate director with the Defense and Security segment of the global consultancy Guidehouse. I'm bringing 2 decades of experience as a lawyer, as an investigator, as an intelligence analyst, risk and compliance professional and strategist. And I bring all of that to help clients solve challenges in the national security space. Pardon me. And what I focus on is really bringing collaboration and building networks across government and industry. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about. And I am very excited to be here today with this group of women to talk about how we can bring industry and academia and government together to solve some of our most pressing challenges.
All right. Thanks, Megan. Yvette, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I am 𝗞𝗲𝘆𝗜𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗁. I'm thrilled to be here with you this morning and excited for our discussion on the rapid pace of change in security and technology, as well as the critical importance of collaboration in this field. I've spent 27 years working in government IT, and 14 of those years focused on security. Almost 2 years ago, I transitioned from state government to local government. And initially, I was worried that I would miss the collaborative environment, but I quickly discovered that my network of state, county, and federal partners not only remained intact, but also expanded to include cities and towns and educational institutions. In the field where change happens so quickly, having a strong network for collaboration is invaluable. And I look forward to this engaging discussion. And thank you all for joining us. Happy to be here with you all.
Thanks, Yvette. And Gretchen.
Good morning, everyone. I am equally as thrilled to be here with these amazing women that have been making so much change in the world in regard to cybersecurity and security in general. I'm Gretchen Bliss. I am the Director of Cybersecurity Programs at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. And I bring to the conversation today 25 years of working in government on that cyber problem when it wasn't called cyber back in the 90s. And then I came into education where, as we talked about, there's a huge need for people in this industry across industries. And I really want to help build programs and build an ecosystem because I feel like that pace of change, like Yvette said, and like Megan was talking about, is just way, way, way faster than a lot of the systems we have right now. So we have to be dynamic and build that ecosystem so that we can work together to do things to make sure that we're meeting the need of the country and the world in this area called security. So I'm excited to share with you some of my perspective from the education side today as we walk through this discussion. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, thank you. And again, my name is 𝗞𝗲𝘆𝗫𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗁. I'm currently the CEO for the National Cybersecurity Center. And so the National Cybersecurity Center is really a collaborative organization. It's a not-for-profit focused on cybersecurity resilience. My background has been 20 plus years in public sector, both at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as industry experience in consulting. So proud to sponsor this today and thrilled to have a panel of such strong cybersecurity women. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And so as we look at this topic of conversation, you know, like we said, there's so much going on in cybersecurity, and there always has been, you know, but the focus tends to change and it tends to accelerate, right? It's really been evolving pretty quickly. So if we think about really the speed of change that's happening in security and technology, we're going to talk about that in all three areas. So all three expertise. So Megan, you want to talk a little bit about what does the speed of change look like in industry? What have you seen most recently?
Absolutely. I mean, the speed of change, like everywhere else, is rapid right now. And I think I have to caveat it with I'm just one small sliver of industry, right? National security industry and the defense industrial base. is a small component, and it's very closely aligned to government. So we have a unique lens. But from that lens, the last 5 years have been monumental in terms of the amount of change we've seen. And we've seen the tech move faster than the people. And that's a theme that recurs over and over again. But in terms of the tech that's changed and the security environment that's changed, those AI-enabled cyber attacks are top of mind, right? We've seen them advance from the days of the Nigerian prince with poor spelling to now having AI-enabled deep fakes that have fooled financial industry experts and banks and whatnot to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. So we're really entering a new stage of what the cyber attack looks like, and really need to think about that. Those generative AI tools as well, watching those evolve, watching those become more and more sophisticated and capable, emotionally intelligent, and really seeing them come from partners in creation and development to almost companions, right? And what does that mean for us? And what does that mean in terms of what we can provide to the government from a defensive perspective? But also, what does it mean in terms of doors that it opens for us to do more creative things and use it more interestingly? So, really looking at a lot of those things. And you cannot ignore that in this moment in time, we're on the cusp of quantum. I mean, it's already here, but in terms of scalable quantum, we're right there. And we really cannot think about AI without thinking about the impacts of what that exponential computational power is going to mean. And so a lot of thought is going there. Again, I say thought, action is following, and I think is underway, but there needs to be a lot more. But we all recognize it's going to be a game changer, and that it's going to be used for good and for bad. And so what that means for our national security industry is really that we need to prepare for those quantum powered AI enabled attacks, and really start thinking about that, as well as some of the more offensive things and quantum encryption and things that we can use in that way too. So really leaning in there. I think in particular, our critical infrastructure community, kind of the subset within that, must be alert to all of these changes. And I think that both industry and government are very focused there, with publicized attacks like the Colonial Pipeline, to some of the living off the land attacks that we've heard about that the FBI is tracking and has even openly acknowledged. It's very clear that critical infrastructure is a focal point of our adversaries. And they're testing the waters right now. They're really looking to see what our boundaries are and what their capabilities are as part of a longer term strategy. So we're definitely focusing on that too as an area that we want to defend and protect and strengthen, right? And there are a lot of older things in infrastructure that need to be modernized in order to do that. So modernization is a big part of that too. But really, I think at a high level, Alita, in a quantum capable universe, normal responsiveness is not going to be enough. So we're looking at ways to shore that up, but really to have a truly anticipatory approach, we're going to need collaboration. And that's why this conversation is so important. We're going to need threat sharing. We're going to need all sorts of things that are going to make us stronger, require that we do not operate in silos. And I believe that the industrial base understands that and starting to leverage ISAC, the information sharing and threat analysis centers. They're going to leverage those, and they're starting to communicate more effectively in those forums and in other forums that we can discuss today. But I think it really underscores why this conversation is so important. And that's not just industry and government, it's also academia, because academia has the responsibility and the weight of training the workforce for both those that we want to hire in the future, but also those who are going to drive our mission sets. And so that's some of the things we're thinking about. I don't know if that meets the mark, but I'll hand it over to you because I'd love to hear what Yvette says as well about government.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a lot of conversation, I agree, about critical infrastructure and just the need that we can't do it individually. It needs to be more of a team effort. So more on that as we get into it. So Yvette, let's talk about government. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. With the speed of change, we must be intentional about keeping up with those trends and technologies and security because things are always shifting and transforming. If we even think back to the pandemic when everybody was remote, sent home to work remote, how things quickly changed and accelerated. With security, how many had VPN? Now it's everybody has remote access. And then standing up that infrastructure to be able to support and video calls, soft phones, decreasing digital footprints, physical footprints, I should say. So much change happened so quickly. And yeah, that pandemic, speed happens, the speed of change that seemed so long ago, right? And now it's the norm. With Gen AI, now we're searching for ways to use generative AI to improve cyber defenses, automated remediation, predictive threat intelligence. While threat actors discover new ways to launch sophisticated attacks, and our business, they're seeking ways to use Gen AI to bring in efficiencies for that automation. But then we also have to understand there's cyber, there's an impact on our cyber insurance as well with AI. So really understanding that. And what we're doing about that at our city is really setting a strong foundation, security foundation, with governance, policies, best practices, and even being involved with the GovAI coalition. So working with San Jose, California, again, Megan, about that collaboration, right? We're seeing these challenges, we're in these challenges together, maybe different industries, but we are in this together, and collaborating is definitely a must. With Gen AI, you mentioned opening those doors. It is going to open those doors to bring those efficiencies. But we must educate our workforce. And what is that awareness about Gen AI? Thinking intelligent about artificial intelligence. So we're training our workforce to not hand over sensitive information, to fact check everything, read those privacy statements. And we, as IT and security, we don't want to be the roadblock. We want to be flexible. We want our workforce to learn and have fun, but just be educated around that. And another aspect with the Gen AI is really to think about your procurement process. What is in those contracts? What's in those terms and conditions? What are they doing with our data, and how are they keeping it private and protected? It is our data. It could be your data. That creativeness with government, we're typically planning our budget 1 to 3 years out. So being very strategic, innovative, and creative around that budget when bringing in that technology is definitely a must. So understanding what the business needs are today, what is that going to look like 3 to 5, 10 years out? Is that a good fit today, or is it scalable? So that innovation and really being able to accelerate in that change is a must. So yeah, the strategy around that is being agile, incremental change, adding value now, start now, and don't wait. Keeping up with that.
That's great, because I think a lot of times as technology people, security people, right, we would lock it all down and not let anybody do anything, right? If we had it our way, but we know that that's not really realistic. People have to work. We have to be able to provide services. You know, there's other things that need to be done, but that, and I think your point about education, you know, people who either need to reskill or upskill. You know, I had the pleasure this week of speaking, you know, to some of Gretchen's students and middle schoolers, and it was amazing the questions that they asked, even from middle school, and their understanding of cyber and how she's contributing, you know, directly to that. But so it really starts at middle school and goes all the way up, right, to the people who really want to switch careers or become, you know, more cyber focused. So thanks a lot for those insights for government. And so with education, Gretchen, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, 𝗠𝗏𝗏. And I love being in these conversations because that collaboration really helps us adapt in times of change, right? And so one of the things with education is that we really do try to initiate and sustain that conversation with industry and government, because I think, Megan, you made the comment, tech moves faster. industries. Well, it moves faster than policy, it moves faster than educational systems. And so our collaboration, I think, really helps to carry that conversation through. And so, right now there's over 400,000 jobs available in cybersecurity in the United States. 25,000 of them are in Colorado alone. And so it's a really big need for workforce. And as you mentioned, that doesn't even include the quantum, the AI, the ML, the data science, the systems engineering components of that. And that would just raise that number even more. And so as an educational institution, you can be paralyzed by all that demand. And so what we've tried to do is really create a collaborative space where we can work across educational institutions. In Colorado, we are particularly connected with our community college system and our K-12 system, trying to really build those pathways to you guys in industry to make sure that we're responding to what you need, right? And so just a little history lesson. In 1999, the National Security Agency put together a program called the Centers of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity. It started with 7 universities. It is now 480 universities as of last month. And that's just creating a standard of what these programs do to respond to the needs in cybersecurity. So our students are coming out ready for those jobs, and that program has been amazing. And about half of those schools are community colleges. So university and community colleges working together to build ways that we have programs that industry and government then provide pathways of those students into industry. One of the really neat things that we do as well is the last 8 years, I've worked with industry and government to find out what is it you really want. Like, okay, we have our academic programs, we have that theoretical knowledge, but how do we really get these students ready in all those industry, all those areas, both Megan and Yvette that you listed, right? All these different pieces of cyber, because it's like a rainbow. And so we have come up with a conclusion that if we look at educational programs, not just from the academic degree seeking side, but also the hands-on experience, right? We've talked about apprenticeships and internships and other disciplines. In cyber, that's been a really big part of getting our students into these industry and government jobs. And sometimes that's an actual internship where you let them touch computers. And sometimes it's competitions where you get to do it in a safe space. The third piece of that is industry certifications, which community colleges are great at. They've been working with industry certifications for a very long time. However, universities are less involved in that, right? And so we're trying to really open the aperture so that those students can have all 3 of those things and be ready for the workforce along the way or at the end of their journey. Again, providing pathways, as Alita mentioned. Maybe there are people that want to retool that are in a slightly different industry that want to get some cyber stink. Let's come up with ways for them to do that through both academics and workforce development programs. I think that's probably, one of the bigger pieces of this is having those continuous conversations and trying things out and seeing what works. And so in addition to the workforce, we got to think about research. And I think, Megan, you mentioned a little bit about this at the beginning of your talk is not only do we need to have the workforce doing this, we need to also have our faculty and doing that hard research to understand those technological challenges, right? And so we need to create coalitions where they work together. We work with the Space ISAC here in Colorado Springs, as well as the NCC, giving our students that hands-on experience, being a part of the industry challenges that they face along the way. And I think that's something that I highly recommend across the nation. And if you ever want to check it out, the CAE community has a map where you can go and see in your area if there is a university that's a CAE program, and go talk to them, reach out, get engaged with their programs, because they all want to have industry and government input so that their students can become a valuable member of the workforce. So I think the biggest part of this is making sure we have that conversation continuously with government and industry so the educational programs can evolve in any way possible and be able to keep on that front edge of that technological change and be as responsive and proactive, as you guys mentioned earlier, as possible. And sometimes that's hard for established academic institutions. And some of us are working really hard together to do it as a group, because I always say the highway of cybersecurity is 41 lanes wide. Everybody learns slightly differently. Everybody's going to go into a slightly different area. So if we all work together to build these programs, then we'll be able to fill all those 41 lanes and all those jobs out there by having a whole rainbow of programs across the country to be able to meet that workforce need and protect our nation.
I think that's a great visual. There are so many facets of cyber that people can get engaged in. And I think sometimes they just think, oh, it's heads down and it's, this is how it's going to go. But there are just little niches all over the place that people can really contribute and grow their careers, whether it's pen testing or policy or, education, so many different ways to get involved. So as we talk about all those different levels of collaboration, and Gretchen gave, quite a few great examples of that. But Megan, what do you see? I mean, how are you involved in more collaborative conversation and really opening this up to, let's talk about what are some of the key collaborative efforts that we can do to really make sure that we collectively move forward?
Absolutely. I'm going to answer that question wearing two hats. One hat is as a Colorado native, and sort of apart from what I'm seeing on the day to day at Guidehouse, and that is I see amazing collaboration in Colorado and Colorado Springs in particular. There's sort of this ecosystem of folks that might be competing for the same audiences or donors, really working together, and I love that model. So looking at NCC, looking at Space ISAC, looking at Catalyst Campus, and how they all interact and work with you, Gretchen, and ISSA and other organizations. So I would love to see more communities across the United States look at that as a model to say, in a traditionally competitive space, if you lean in and support each other, we can do so much more. And we are so much more powerful together. And when we host things and do things together, we just draw people in, and then we're able to tap the students that Gretchen might bring, or, anybody that might be through the Catalyst campus as a small business could come in and support industry, and we can help train people through NCC. All of these things come together, and we are better if we work together. So I'd love that to be a model for other communities. Now, switching hats and going back to sort of a national security consultant perspective, on that one, there are a lot of really cool things happening. Some of my favorites, and Gretchen, you could probably speak to this better than I can, but NSA has done an amazing job with their Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. It's only a few years in the running, and they started with like 10 defense industrial based companies and trying to build that collaboration. Now they're well above 1,000, and it's just gained so much steam, and it's getting people comfortable from the industry perspective having a conversation with government, which has always been very challenging because industry doesn't want to. I see somebody made fireworks, so thank you for that. But I mean, it's always been challenging because people don't want to say the good, the bad, and the ugly. They want to pretend like everything's great and we're on the cusp of, we're doing all the right things. And they don't want to say, this is really hard or we failed. And they see failure as a failure as rather than something to learn from, something to share, something to talk openly about so that we can collectively brainstorm on how we solve that problem in the future, right? And you crowdsource lessons learned. And so seeing this happen at that kind of level and at that pace, it's nothing short of inspirational. So I'm really excited that Morgan Adamski was the first director of that center, and now they've got somebody coming in who I'm sure is going to be equally powerful and just drive it forward. And I'm really excited about that one in particular. Also excited, CISA is doing similar good things with their Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. So, if you are sort of looking for guidance and getting your toe wet and you don't know where you stand in the cybersecurity environment, CISA is a great place to go as a resource to just sort of understand the large scale environment. And there are a lot of tools there that you can access for free or go through their marketplace, and just a great resource. So I think being a resource and kind of having those open doors is something that CISA is doing well, and kind of, it's inviting everybody. It's a huge tent, a 41 lane highway, and they're doing that well, right? So those are some really good ones. And again, you mentioned the ISACs. I have a special place in my heart for the Space ISAC. So yeah, I think that that's a really good touch point for folks. But there are a lot more. I'm sure I'm forgetting a number that I'm engaged with, and I don't want to be remiss, but all of those collaboration efforts, they're not competing. They're all pushing us forward. They're raising the bar, and each one of them should be supported.
Yeah, I think that those are some great points. I know that when I was in government, right? Government, and Yvette can speak to this, right? They tend to share, right? Here's a challenge. So how can one government help another government, either state level, local level, even federal to some extent? How does that help each other? But then sometimes industry too, you're right, is a little more competitive. So here's a scenario, and maybe one vendor wants to do this and another vendor wants to do something else in order to protect that scenario, but still they're all looking for their own business. But a way to really come together and support really makes us, to your point, makes us all stronger in the process, as well as educating people. So I don't know, Yvette, from a collaborative perspective, are there certain organizations you work with more, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so something that works really well for us, it's probably been over the last year. We have a monthly cyber partner collaboration call, and this is with Secretary of State and other state agencies like OIT. We have CISA on the line. We have counties, cities, towns, and this is a monthly call. We talk about threat sharing, best practices. We share resources, whether that's a template, a plan, a playbook, a policy. One of the calls that we had, really valuable, I think, is we shared our experiences through a cyber attack. So Wheatridge shared theirs. I talked about the CDOT attack, and then there was Fremont County talking about theirs. So what were the lessons learned? What could they have done to prevent? What are they doing now to prevent? And then also talking about the human element, right? Working through this, frustration, devastation, being prideful when you come out of it. But there's a lot of emotions that go along with being in a cyber attack event and an incident, and that's not always talked about. So being able to share those stories and being there for one another was awesome. And when an event just recently happened months ago on one of the school districts, I was one, and I'm sure there were many others that were knocking on that door to that CIO to say, hey, how can we help? What do you need? Again, because we're in this together. And Megan, like you, I'm a Colorado native, so very proud to be a Colorado and want to protect our state, right? Some of the organizations that I'm a part of, or that many of us, and this is what this session's about, is sharing information and resources. So encourage you to sign up, community, if you're not already, but CISA, MSI, SAC, Colorado Equals Security, that's a good one. You mentioned that this isn't about competing against one another. Last week at RMIS, Rocky Mountain Security Conference, next to our booth, so I was there supporting LIFT, Women Empowering Women in Technology and Security. Next to us was WESIS. Next to them was Women in Security. And we're not competing against each other. We're really here to support and lift each other up. So those types of organizations as well. What's working well for us as well for collaboration at a technology level with the city of Lakewood is our organization is building a future-ready Lakewood. We're very innovative with our partners, and our partners are our business. And we do that through technology and collaboration. And I like to say no decision about them without them, right? Making decisions together. Alita, we worked with NCC, and that was a fabulous partnership on an assessment that's going to transform our security ecosystem. So yeah, really just leveraging what's out there.
Well, and I think your point's even about data, right? NCC is working on some critical infrastructure work, but it's all based on the data that's out there that sometimes people don't leverage, kind of going back to the silos. So bringing that data together and then making it available and working with multiple vendors or multiple platforms, right? So that organizations can all benefit from that is something I think that's really important, because, data is going to drive not only the collaboration, but AI eventually, right? How well you can do that, how well you can, anticipate threats or how well you can defend against them, right? So collaborating, I think, even on the data front is something that for all of us to be more aware of. And I think too, one of the points, Megan, that you made about, we don't like to talk about the bad stuff. I think one of the approaches, right, to ensuring that you're cyber resilient is really anticipating like worst case. Like what is potentially the worst case, the Grim Reaper effect? That's what I used to call it. So how bad can it be, right? And that's why we do tabletops, right, and things like that. But, those exercises, I think, really can uncover different ways that different organizations can contribute to being more cyber resilient. So whether that's, organizations like NCC facilitating that, or education, I know that a lot of it happens there, right? Those are things where coming together, I think, really is very beneficial. And I don't know, Gretchen, if you have anything to add there.
Well, I think Yvette read my mind, because one of the big things that I want to talk about was, that diversity piece. And I'm so glad that's exactly how it needs to work, right? We all work together. We go to each other's events. We reinforce, we help each other. I was a 𝗲𝗏 mentor last year, and I really enjoyed having those conversations and learning about what was going on in our ecosystem. And so, I think sometimes that in the cyber industry, sometimes people go back to the same well over and over, and they can only produce at a certain rate. And so you've got to change your mindset and maybe look at diversity, not just of programs, not just of education, not just of content, but writ large. We do have a diversity issue in cybersecurity in particular. I think it's only 21% of women now are working in this industry, which is not good. We got to keep working on that. But also the ethnic piece. So this August, we are doing 2 all Spanish cyber camps, because in Colorado, we have 4 majority counties that are Spanish speaking counties that we really want to reach out to that community and invite them into this conversation, show them the value of their perspective and experience in this discipline. And, the multidisciplinarity, right? It's not always just in the tech field. I know Megan does a lot of policy, and all the legal piece, and all of that needs to have some sort of cyber understanding. I always tell my students when they come through, the 2 things that'll always make you the better candidate than the guy sitting next to you is knowing a different language and having some cyber stink on you. And that's something that you can leverage no matter what industry you go into, whether you go into any international conversations. It's just as important as the stuff that goes on for our nation. And then the last thing is kind of that ethics and excellence that we've touched on a few times, but I wanted to really foot stomp, particularly the ethics piece that Megan launched with, is you can't teach the bad guys different stuff. All you can do is create a conscience as you're giving them the understanding to make sure that they're going to do the right thing or recognize if something's going wrong. And so that's something at the beginning of our camps. They sign the cybersecurity oath that Montreat College put together, and we go through it line by line and we discuss it, and we hold each other accountable during camp for what might cross the line in some of these pieces. And so I think having that, and it goes back to Megan's thing about policy, right? As an organization in industry and government, you need those policies. But I think teaching students that there are guidelines up front is really important. And then that excellence piece, right? We want to have the best people we can have in here. And sometimes it goes to that, we don't admit failure that you guys were talking about earlier. Sometimes that failure is how we actually learn, how we get students even more involved and more interested in this. So as you have your exercises, as you have your events, think about reaching out to a local school and saying, hey, do you have students that might want to just see how this works? At the university, we can work with NDAs and those sorts of things, but even just small pieces that you can share with your community. 2 weeks ago on Friday, all of the computer science teachers and cyber teachers across Colorado got together up at St. Vrain Valley School District. 5 universities sponsored lunch for them. And we had that discussion of what can we do to help and have this conversation and give you guys the resources and connectivity to keep up with the speed of this. Because elementary and high school, that curriculum piece is even harder than it is in university. And so if we can start building that conversation, exposing industry and government to those students and those pathways and vice versa, then we'll get ahead of this and we'll be able to run instead of crawl. I just think it's going to take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we have a question. Thank you, Alina. So if funding was not a constraint, what would each of the panelists focus on most and hope to solve? So you have unlimited funds. What would you do? Anyone?
That's a very good question. I mean, I'd start a whole like quantum encryption, like really get some great algorithms and back those folks that are doing that so they don't have to do it piecemeal, bit by bit by bit, and prove themselves, but just really get to dive deep down and solve it, and hopefully in a way that reflects diversity and brings in all the different players into that environment. That would be a fun project, but I don't know. There's so many different things you could do. Does anybody else have something that's jumping right to mind?
Well, I would create an internship for students in any pathway, especially in the public sector. Having come from Department of Defense, I realize the resource constraints that the public has, and maybe creating statewide internships. I work closely with Jill, our CISO in Colorado, to try and have that conversation around if we gave every city 2 interns and paid for them, what would everybody learn? And it would be amazing. And we could build this entry level, mid-level advancement and kind of what that pathway would be. So if I had unlimited resources, I would get students into this directly earlier so they can integrate their book learning and the university learning with their actual industry and being out in the world and being able to build on that into making better jobs, better security across the nation.
And if I had unlimited funds, so tying all this together, Gretchen, hearing you about those interns and getting them, hands-on experience. We had a cyber attack simulation that NCR organized, and this was with state, local, and federal partners. This took a year-long planning. It was an awesome exercise, but getting interns, students involved in that, and doing it more frequently. And because it takes so long to plan and do, and money tied to that. But hey, if there's unlimited funds, let's do this often and continually get more people added to those types of exercises. And not only just cyber folks, technologists, but our emergency operations center as well. So really integrating cyber into the EOC. So let's get them involved as well. Students and et cetera, unlimited funds. Let's do it all the time.
Can I
Yeah.
keep spending? Like, I'm just
What would you keep spending on, Megan?
I want to keep spending. One thing I would do, I would solve the clearance problem, which is that it's very hard to get people cleared and it's very hard to share information with certain information that is appropriately or perhaps overclassified. And so getting people into that process or figuring out a way to get them access to information that does not need to be classified at a certain level, so that we can help with information sharing. I would love to do that. And I'd love to start it with that student like intern. So we get them in the pipeline so it doesn't take forever and we don't lose them as potential talent because it takes too dang long to wait
Yeah.
for a clearance.
Okay.
So I'd solve that problem. And I'd also give all of those students access to a cyber range where they could train and game and learn how to defend and protect on their schedule, anytime, full access. So local company that I know is engaged in that as an example is Circadence. And like I think it's such a cool concept to have that gamification and training at a young age so that they really get there. Because to your point, Gretchen, we can train folks that have been in the industry for a long time, but we really need, we need access to those types of tools to stay current. And so I'd love to make that something that was just open access for our students, our teachers, and anybody that's looking to get into this industry.
That's great. That's
I'll
great.
keep
I
spending
agree.
if you want, Alita.
I have 2 things that I would spend on. So I think the first one is, when I was at the city of Aurora, I really had the opportunity to gain true appreciation for critical infrastructure, water, electricity, all of those, but especially on the waterfront, it was, if it was up to me, I think I would find a way to really educate and show people how that whole process really works because we all think, well, here are the big, water utilities and, we take it all kind of for granted. But when you start to break down how all of those, how all that infrastructure really works, and, we've all talked for years about, humans are the weakest link, right? And so in critical infrastructure, you might have a really small utility of some sort that feeds into all of the big ones all across the state and all across the nation. But, you know, a lot of times the guy who's the security guy might also be the guy mowing the yard. He might also be the guy, you know, answering the door. And so finding a way to really make sure that people understand the just the requirement, right, for security around critical infrastructure, because it wouldn't take long if we didn't have water or we didn't have power, right? That could really impact us, right, pretty significantly. So that would be one program that I think I would really elevate. And then the second one is that we talk a lot about K through 12 and community college, but just because of something that happened to me personally, if you go to the other end, you know, we still have a generation that doesn't like computers, doesn't understand when things happen, still is okay with the Nigerian prince, you know, reaching out to them. And so, you know, a couple of months ago, my husband's grandmother, who is 100, she is 100. She lives in Colorado Springs. Someone reached out to her and said, "Your grandson's in trouble," my husband. And she bought it all, right? Went and got $8,500 in cash to give to somebody who was going to show up at her door, right? And so she just didn't understand, never occurred to her, right, that this wasn't something that was real. So I think continuing to either have a platform or an education or some kind of portal, right, that people who really don't understand could be protected, and even just at a really basic level. So now we all have a safe word, right, that she has to use in case someone really calls her and wants money and she doesn't really understand. But those are things I think that are really impactful, that on both ends, right, of the spectrum, kids as well as people who really just don't understand or need to manage it maybe a little bit differently. So, all right. So we spent a lot of money. So, so what about kind of the overarching ecosystem? I think that we've covered, right, a lot of components of that. But as we think about all the things that go into play, not only in, you know, each of us in our jobs and in our personal lives and what we see, but what are some of the things that you think could be the most impactful overall to the security ecosystem? Ooh, tough question. Collaboration we talked about. Anything else like in particular? Having kind of that unified approach, incident response, what do we think?
I'm going to go out on a limb here. This one's probably a little bit different because I think, you know, particularly for you, Alita and Yvette, you're looking at the now, and I'm kind of looking at more towards the future as a, you know, in terms of job function. And so this one might sound a little bit off in that direction, but I think explainability is something that comes up a lot, and I think it goes to your point, Alita, of that multi-generational guarding against threats to all those different generations and different familiarity levels, but really making sure that whatever tech emerges, whatever tools we adopt, that they are explainable to everybody on that human level, and so that we can bring the people forward to meet the tech. And so, you know, specifically, I'm thinking of explainability in terms of AI. And what that means to me is making sure that when it is developed, it is documented. You know what was developed, what went into the secret sauce, and that your leadership is able to explain how it works and be able to explain in what ways that organization is using AI, right? So that every person in that organization is able to understand it better, and relate to it and develop their own relationship with that tech, right? With that emerging tech. And I think that, you know, not only allows us to take advantage of AI and future tech, to use it for good and to be using it in the way that Gretchen and others are trying to train the workforce of the future to do. But it also is going to enhance our security because we're going to understand the core fundamentals. So I think, you know, certainly from a strategic standpoint, having leaders focus on explainability would be very valuable.
Yeah. Well, and you can't protect what you don't know,
Correct.
right? And
It's like
so,
knowing where the crown jewels are, right? And being able
mhm,
to map your infrastructure. If you can't do these things and you can't explain them in lay terms, um, you're already behind the ball, right?
mhm. Nope, I agree. Yvette,
Yeah,
Gretchen, other thoughts about
I
that?
like the explainability, and through that partnership that I had mentioned, Alita, with NCC, this was a great opportunity, Megan, that we got to experience that explainability. I like that word. Meeting with our our city, our enterprise, every department, every division, talking to them about what technology are they using, explain to us what technology are you using for what service, using what task, and then really getting an understanding of, okay, if that technology wasn't available because of natural disaster, an outage, an attack, etc., what does that look like? Pen and paper? Does the business or service completely stop? So really understanding that explainability also helps us be more cyber resilient, protecting even further on the front end, safeguarding, or prioritization and recovery. I like that
Mm,
explainability. Thanks, Megan.
Well, and resilience. I love your nod to resilience too, and I agree.
mhm. Gretchen?
Well, and I think some of it goes to all of that in my mind is when you bring that all together is being creative in those conversations and engagements, like not just saying, oh, we have to do it this way. I think a lot of times we get stuck to Megan's point about in the past and the way it worked before and the policies and the structures and the frameworks that we had, not really being open to that. Okay, how can we more creatively, dynamically engage this, right? How can we understand it better? How can we go outside the lines a little bit and figure out who needs to be involved or invite people in, not even knowing exactly what their role is to see if maybe they have a different perspective that they can add to the success of the conversation or the activity or the exercise or the event. I really think that creativity and openness, and creativity is probably not exactly the right word, but like being more open to that kind of expansion of we don't have to stay within certain rails when we're trying to tackle some of these things. And I know that makes people really uncomfortable, especially in the government where I was. And so I think there's a way we have to engage with that where we create these gray areas on the side where people can go and try and find new ways of looking at things and new ways of bringing technology to the forefront of what we're doing successfully and getting people to engage with it more successfully. I always tell our engineers, you can build the best cybersecurity thing, but if it sits in the middle of the room, the first time somebody touches it, if you haven't explained to them how to use it properly, it's not the best cybersecurity thing that you could ever have, right? So we got to think about it in a systemic way of how can we creatively engage across the spectrum of security, who needs to be involved where, and how can you get the HR people to meet the engineers and the engineers to meet the business people and the marketing, having those broader conversations, I think will bring out a little bit more understanding and more success and best practices and exploration. Because I think there's a lot we don't try because we're either afraid of trying it or, wow, we tried something like that a while ago and it didn't work. And it's like, well, but technology's changed and the context has changed and maybe we need to look at it with a new lens.
Yeah.
Well, and things, we all know once policy is established, sometimes it's really hard to change that, right? And so, but things are so iterative, they're moving so quickly, that you need to go back and revisit it at a certain point. It's not just, let's make this AI policy and now that's the AI policy, which Colorado was having a lot of conversation around and other states as well. But we have to make sure that it's as long-term as we know at this point. Right, because to your point, it's going to be things that are going to have to change as technology evolves, and we're all trying to keep up with that. So, all right. So I think we've had some really great conversation today. Really appreciate everybody's input and thoughts and questions. So what I'd like to do is just get a quick 30-second, what's your closing thought? What do you really want to impart upon our audience before we go? Gretchen, you can go first.
Thank you. I think the biggest thing I want to encourage you is not to be afraid to reach out. There are students, as you mentioned, Alita, when you were at our camp, anywhere from middle school to postdoc that are really excited to be a part of this, just don't know where to start. So please reach out, have those conversations, work with your local high school or middle school, come to the university, or if you're in industry and you have a hard problem, call a professor. Look on that Center of Academic Excellence page, see who's doing the work in this area that you're interested in, and just give them a call and have that conversation and see if there's not something that you can do. I think a lot of times people, I always call it the purple unicorn syndrome, right? They want education to hand them a purple unicorn. And, you know, we make unicorns, but we don't necessarily make purple ones. So we need you guys to help us with that. And so kind of being a part of that conversation along the way, especially in security and cybersecurity, is so important, because if you want a certain, you know, purple pen tester, then you got to work with somebody to get that purple pen tester. And so just be brave and reach out and be willing to kind of be along for that conversation in the ride with the students, giving them that opportunity. So I would just say, don't wait for it to be dropped on your door, because it may not happen. Go out and engage in the community and have those conversations.
Yep. Look for the purple pen tester. So, Megan?
I love that. Gretchen, I think your new code word is going to be Baskin Robbins, because you have you have all the different colorful analogies. I love it so much. You know, I'm going to go in a different direction, because Gretchen's last comment has me spinning. I run a human-centered design team, so I'm always thinking about how humans are at the sort of crux, the center of everything, right? And I think, to your point, Gretchen, about creativity, what got us here will not get us there, right? And I think that goes to the whole topic that we're talking about today. It's the speed. The speed means that we cannot close that gap. We have to find different solutions to close the gap, to get people where tech is, and to keep them, you know, they're never going to be right on pace together, but they should be close, right? And we're going to have to find different ways of doing that than we have historically, because of the speed, the accelerating speed of development and tech. And so I think, from a security perspective, looking for creative ways, looking for collaboration, understanding collaboration is just, it's not a fuzzy word. It's real. It's tangible. You can put it into practice, just like Yvette and Alita did, you know, with the leadership exercise, tabletops, etc. How can you exercise it and think creatively, think big, take big swings at how we can collaborate better, because we need something different to get us there. So I'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you. Yvette?
All right. So today you heard how invaluable collaboration is, and that collaboration to help move us forward. You heard about the speed of change. I really like to think big, so I'm going to say think big and take these small steps. Start now. Start today. I want you to pick up that phone. I want you to send that email. I want you to join that group. Go to that conference. Make those connections. Start now.
Absolutely. And I think my one takeaway, just based on what everyone else has said, is have a conversation. You never know where that conversation is going to go. Big conversation, little conversation, agree. Just start now and build collaboration and help improve just the ecosystem overall. So with that, I'll close out. Thanks so much to everybody for your input, your advice, your thoughts today. It was so valuable. Great to be here. So thanks again, and we will wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you for joining our digital dialogue. Be sure to join our next digital dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.